Tobias, we have a special section in this podcast that we have called the Rapid 7. So it's the Rapid 7 because there are 7 questions, and the 7 questions have to be answered real fast. So okay. Rapid 7 makes sense.
Sure. So is that the sequel of the Glorious 7, the famous movie?
Nice. No. Oh. No, it's the Interchange 7.
Okay, good. I'll give it my very best to be fast, although I'll have trouble with answering fast.
Well, do you want to start this out?
We'll get it started. So, coffee or tea?
Coffee. Yeah. And tea, both.
I like it, both.
Didactic or experiential?
Experiential.
Describe the future in one word.
Curious.
Describe the present in one word.
Exhausting.
Describe your state of mind in one word.
Open.
Your favorite word.
Didactic.
An inspirational message or advice in no more than 5 words.
Never stop learning. It's 3.
I like it.
More than enough.
Right, that's efficient.
Do you want to add didactic in it?
No. I fired that bullet already, so cannot fire it twice in a 7 setting.
Makes sense. But never stop learning is something that is very powerful, that is very important, and that is something that we need not just to sort of improve on a personal level, on a self-actualization level, but if we want to survive the changes, we have to learn. This is not a luxury anymore. It is an actual necessity.
Yeah, but it's not only about surviving. I mean, it's more about evolving, isn't it? I mean, learning gives me so much energy, and I don't believe in like the general sense of purpose, but I think this going back to the Greeks, to Aristotle and eudaimonia and all that, I think that this is the sense on the meaning of life is evolving and creating a better version of myself and constantly doing that kind of stuff. That's what I think is the essence of all, or at least my essence.
I agree. The meaning of survival is that things are changing so fast, and at some point, the work that we have, the opportunities that are around us, they would require a new set of skills. They would require growth mindset. They would require a lot of adaptability. They would require a lot of emotional intelligence. And if we do not come to develop those skills and those mindsets, I know you don't like mindsets, but if we want to use the word just per se, if we don't come to really nurture all that kind of a toolbox that we have, this human toolbox that we have, we will be quite disadvantaged. So the learning experience, I see it as spanning the entire pyramid of needs, from basic needs, basic survival, because we will be completely disconnected from the world we live in, up until the point where we actually reach a higher level of evolution, of personal actualization, of achievement of self.
That is true, I agree, but my former boss used to say everything in front of a but is bullshit. So beware what's coming now. So I would disagree on that a little bit, because I think this survival mode, it is true and I believe it, but I don't think it's the right way, the right didactic on achieving and transformation in people. Because what you accomplish when putting that on the table is that people get afraid and they stall, they're paralyzed, they go into freeze mode, so they don't change at all. So they do the exact opposite what you want them to do. So if you're telling people you need to change or adopt or die, evolve or die kind of approach, people will choose to die. And so I think we should rather build a bridge towards this can be really fun. That could be a fun journey. I wouldn't lie to them. It's hard and we have setbacks. We have talked about that. But I really think could be a great adventure, and it could be exciting. And really, we have to excite people into learning and not to scare them into learning. That's what I believe.
If we want that
but
creativity.
Basically, the needs are not necessarily things that you need to hate or you need to abhor. So when we talk about a job, which is at the lower side of the pyramid of needs, because you need to have some income, it doesn't mean that you have to abhor the job. It doesn't mean that you have to hate the job. It's something that you actually appreciate and love. So it's not about scaring people off by telling them, if you don't do this, you're going to die. But it's about being aware of what is at risk here and acknowledging that risk and being aware that there is a process that we need to go through in order to become the individuals that, one, we can become, and that, two, we need to become in order to meet the opportunities that will come for us. So it's not from a scaring perspective that this is said. It's more from a, hey, we need to have a wake-up call, and this is something that we need to realize, a really strong, powerful wake-up call. At least this is how I see it.
I would
You're
disagree.
both right, but I see absolutely the balance between the two. There does have to be the degree of awareness of the problems, but there also has to be something to stop people from that paralysis, because that fear does stop people from creating. And you need that creative mindset if you're going to be building something new, something that doesn't exist yet, which is what we need. We need to radically change the way that we're looking at things. So awareness of the scale of the problem is absolutely essential. Any scientist will tell you, you need data. You have to build your solutions to fit the scale of your problems. But doing it in a way that is fun can be done. It can be just as much a pleasant experience as we can make it. And that's just as much in how we work and how we learn as it is in what we work at and what we learn. I like that.
Thank you, Mr. Engineer.
I like that both sides were represented in this, because honestly, that's part of what I founded Time Repair Corporation for, was specifically addressing this fear and lack of creation that comes from it, that paralysis. It stops anything useful from happening. And the number of people who should be in their garages tinkering and making amazing solutions based on everyday problems and the problems that they perceive. If we had that, I think that it would really help us to make that practical future together.
Yeah, thank you for your diplomacy between the two of us here. But
terrible habit.
Yeah, but you're all right, both of you, and I think, but I think awareness is not the problem we are having. We are all aware that our education system don't work. We are all aware that we have to change stuff in the political system, blah blah blah. So there are many discussions about that. But just take the mother of complexity, climate change. We have scientific facts to the fullest. We are all aware of that, and nothing changes, or very little is changing. And so we should be all very scared, and it's just not, there's no immediate threat. Or if we take away that stuff, we get paralyzed as that I'm just a little citizens, I cannot do stuff like that. So that's why we try to follow populist people that take that burden away from us, so we don't have to change at all. So we need new paradigms and new ways of getting people into that. And I think excitement is the better way of doing that. And it's not scaring off, is not working in that sense. And I think when it comes to complex problems, we have to, kind of deconstruct them and then really make positive picture and really excite people into change, and that is hard. The how is always the hardest part, but I think there is no other way in treating that problem.
Well, sometimes one could argue that a bit of fear is actually something that is quite interesting. Not so much that you're crippled on stage. And I take the example of theater. For a few years in my life, I did theater. And you know that feeling behind stage where you have that kind of a ball at the bottom of your heart, in between your lungs, and at the upper side, the upper right side of your stomach. And you start to feel this playing around, and you have this anxiety. But then when you go out there, you realize, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. You realize that everything else vanishes because you enter a world that is completely different. So having a bit of fear, not so much that it cripples you, but enough to show you how valuable, how important, how precious this is, followed by immediate immersion into that new world that you're part of and that you're designing and that you're creating, arguably can be also another way to look at it. Basically, we're saying the same thing, we're just in different ways.
Yes, but I just like to disagree with you. No, but I couldn't agree more. But I wouldn't call it like scare people into. Of course, there's a difference between, you could talk to leaders and upper management in a different way than to the mainstream people. I think there is also a responsibility involved in that kind of stuff. However, I totally get the point that you're making here, and I wouldn't call it maybe not fear, but it's more. I think people need to have, or like quote a fellow anti-fragilist from Lebanon, Taleb. He wrote a book about skin in the game. I think that is a beautiful term. We need people to hold people accountable, and they have to be affected by it, and in order to change, and not by just being out of the system, no matter if it's managers and CEOs not being affected by their doing and wrongdoing at all. So I think that is a term that I could agree with, and we need that. And I'm not talking about having all this nicey hippie-ish excitement kind of thing. So I think there is urgency, and we need to act fast, and we have to be very candid about communicating that. But I think we've done that in many cases, and if that's not enough, we also need some other thing. So I've come to learn, I actually changed my mind. If you would have asked me like 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, pressure helps to change, because that's a catalyst for change. But I kind of changed my mind, because if you want sustainable change to be happening, you need a sustainable format, or you need some paradigm or some runway for people to go to, some direction. And that is not done by fearing people, scaring people into that. And there's actually a lot of research said that when you're feared and you're afraid and scared of things, you cannot learn at all, because your brain, your reptile mode is on, and you are concerned with survival. That's why I didn't like that word, and not with learning and experimenting.
Well, that is true. When the amygdala starts screaming around like crazy, it's like danger, danger. Right. It's true that the performance definitely drops. Survival is a very common word in Lebanon, so it's also a bias of my own that I have to recognize because of the current economic situation, political situation, social situation, etc., etc., etc. So it sort of makes sense from a local perspective, but there is a combination of perhaps it's not about scaring people off. It's about having this kind of apprehension / enthusiasm. And usually both go hand in hand. You're afraid of what might happen, but you're also excited about what might happen. And I think these are it's like the yin and yang. These are the two parts of the same coin, more or less. And it's one thing that is very important that you have said, and we're getting off topic, but it's fine. because that's what we do. A lot of times we define things as anti-something, and that leads nowhere. So being aware of the danger of the risk and so on and so forth doesn't mean that you have to place yourself as anti-something. And this is a pattern that we've been seeing all around the world. It's about being pro something. It's about giving a direction towards something. And I think that in that sense, what you said is absolutely crucial, because we need to go from this idea of I'm anti this, I'm anti that, to okay, fine. What is it that you want? Tell me. Let's work on that, and let's move things forward based on what we come up as solution, as ideas, as suggestions, and so on and so forth.
And that is a good way to connect the two ideas, because as soon as you're anti something, you're not a part of anything except this anti-movement. And if you're working towards something instead, then as you said, you've got skin in the game. You are invested. Your time and energy are going someplace, and there is risk. Maybe it fails, whatever it is you're doing, but that's how learning works. It's a process in which you put time and energy, and if it works, then you retain the information, you grow. So giving people this opportunity to grow while experiencing enough of those problems so that they understand their scope, but not so much of them that they are paralyzed by them. That's the balance that education needs to be able to find. And that's the degree of investment that's absolutely necessary. It's actually, in my opinion, the #1 problem with the North American take on education is it's viewed as a service that is being provided to parents that affects their children. They're buying it, they believe, and they demand to talk to a manager if it's not up to standards. And that's not the case. That's not what education is. No, education is that odyssey, that journey that we've been talking about, that trek in which those students, those children have to be empowered, invested in that education. When they ask, what's this math for? We have to be able to give them an answer that not only puts it into a practical sense, the work, the learning that's going to happen, but also that involves them in guiding and really taking ownership of that process. Otherwise, exactly. Why would they care?
And you have to learn that from early on. If you don't learn how to take responsibility for your own learning and you just outsource it to some service provider kind of thing, and you end up feeling entitled, and exactly. that is the problem we're facing right now. I think that's the #1 problem that we're seeing, not only in the US, same here.
Yeah.
And I think fixing that is basically the how question. So I was just arguing, we talk a lot about why we have to change, the reasons, and we find many books about that. We also find a lot about the what's and more creative 21st century skills, blah, blah, blah. And that's all true. And I totally agree with that. But the hardest part is the how. How are we going to change people? How are we going to set up that system? And that's what and that's why I criticize many players in my industry, in our industry, is like in education, they shy away from that because it's hard, and right. It's probably not scalable. I truly believe that good education is not scalable in that sense that you just upload an online course and send it out to a million people, which is a good thing. It's content. It could be bad or good, and it's necessary and it's good that it's out there, but that's not education. You must not confuse information with education. And that is, I'm not going to use the D word again, but I think that is the how. That's how are we going to do that? How are we going to achieve our goals? That's the art and the hardest part of it.
Agreed. And in many a way, the industry is not yet ready to have that conversation sometimes because scalability is convenient.
But
yeah,
that's
it's
why
convenient
we-
and it's easier to sell a 2-day crash course on digital mindset, and people buy that, and companies spend a lot of money on that. It's a beautiful business model, but it's not going to change the mindset at all.
Yeah.
And if you don't ask that question, you never get there. And I think that is one thing. And I think Paul, you also mentioned a point with like this entitlement. I think on the other hand, we also have to communicate that it takes in Shiftschool, I always say it takes two to play tennis. So you have to communicate. We can set the court, we can put the net, I can bring the balls, I can even invite spectators to give us feedback. But the student, the learner has to show up on the court, bring her racket and play with me. If she doesn't participate in that learning process and it's just said, well, just throw the balls at me and teach me how to learn that in theory, is not going to work. She needs to get on the court and get her hands dirty and try to do that kind of stuff. Enter that hero's journey. Otherwise, there is no game. There's no game in coaching, no game in mentoring, no game in learning. And that is also true. So we need that ownership that you've talked about, Paul, and that is essential. And that doesn't come out of nowhere. We have to tell people for early on that there is no shortcut and no entitlement in that direction.
Exactly. No silver bullet. And this is why we have Interchange, is to reach out to and empower as many of those blessed angels of chaos as we can, who are putting in that kind of time and energy to do more than just make something that is information.
Yeah, and that is why we thank you for being with us. We thank you for listening to our endless chatter. We thank you for being angels of chaos and disruptors and misfits and adventurers and Ulysses in your own way. And we thank you for being part of this interchange of our journey and trek and adventure. And we'd love to hear your voice and more of what you have to say and your ideas and your suggestions, so that we can leverage this interchange and cover more topics, cover more countries, cover more ideas, more subjects, and so on and so forth. And of course, Tobias, you were awesome as always. I want to really thank you so very much for joining us and for having this didactic conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You wanted an angel, you ended up with a devil, but that's what you know what to expect. So you know what. Yeah. Anyways, it was a lot of fun.
As a material scientist, I've got to say they're made out of the same material. So, you know,
true.
We're really putting a lot of judgment on
molecules. That's true. That's true. We'll see. I mean, maybe that's the next episode. We may dive into nature versus nurture and stuff like that. So we'll need a lot more Zoom cloud space to finish that off.
Yeah, Angels and Demons edition.
Yeah, it's more in the spiritual learning. It's also a nice topic that we can ponder on.
Could be. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining. See you again next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.